will share them with you. Watch.
When I first met Brian, we were at Sarah Lawrence. I was a sophomore or a junior, and he was the only man at Sarah Lawrence College. He was getting his master's in theater, studying with his mentor, who was our theater teacher. And so we were in a classroom together, and it was Wilfred Leach, who was our teacher, and there suddenly was this dark fellow. We were all kind of sitting around on the floor in this particular class. And then we went on to do productions together, and he wrote plays and he made movies, and we all worked together for a few years, and he actually made a movie. I don't know where this movie is now, but it was called Jennifer.
I wish everybody would stop treating me like the baby of the family, and I wish someone would listen to what I have to say.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
After that, I did Wedding Party with Brian. That was a lot of the Sarah Lawrence gang, and also Wilfred Leach, who was his mentor, was his co-director. And we all sort of disappeared into some Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania, and rented an old mansion and made this insane movie. I went to high school in New York, to the High School of Performing Arts, and then I went on to Sarah Lawrence, and I was in the theater department. And after I left, I became an editorial assistant in order to avoid going into acting, and then felt the call, I guess, and went back to it a year or two later. I didn't move to Los Angeles till like 1971 or 70. Hi Mom I made in New York, Midnight Cowboy, I was living in New York. Brewster McCloud, I was living in New York. Margot and I had a mutual friend, and I was testing for a movie. I was still living in New York and dreaming about moving to LA, and I had come out to test for this movie and visit my girlfriend, Jill Clayburgh, who was in Othello at the Mark Taper. And I was testing for the movie Fat City with John Huston as director, and there were 3 actresses. One was Candy Clark, one was Margot Kidder, and one was me. And as she was getting out of the dress that one had to go on film in and giving it to me to get into this well-seasoned dress, I said, "You're Margie, and you're a friend of Chaim," and she said, "Yes, and you're Jenny," and whatever. And we just became friends immediately. Immediately. By the late afternoon, we had gone on a fast together, because that's what actresses did all the time. And within 2 days, we were looking for a house together, and we looked for a house at the beach, and we moved in. We all felt pretty idealistic about art and movies and the relationship between those two, and we had a lot of confidence in our own place in that universe, which is all kind of well documented in Easy Riders and Raging Bulls by Peter Biskin. So people began showing up. Brian showed up because he moved from New York, and I brought him over to the house. He was really like a brother to me. And he came out to the house, and then he started this romance with Margie, and he stayed. He lived with us for quite a while, and he was friends with Steven Spielberg, and Steven came out, and he was friends with Marty Scorsese and Harvey Keitel, and they came out. And we all spent a lot of time in the water on the beach and eating food that I would make. There was also a house down the beach that belonged to Michael and Julia Phillips, and they were big industry people, and they had all kinds of fancy weekend visitors like Cass Elliot and I don't know. They were amazing, and Julia was she was a real pistol. And so we sort of combined lives. We were just a few houses apart. And we ate a lot of meals together, and our gatherings ended up at her house, and hers ended up at our house. And Paul Schrader was around, and Paul Schrader and Brian would cook up movies sitting on the mattress that we covered in an Indian bedspread and called a couch. And everybody was dreaming up movies. Marty was writing, he was about to make Mean Streets. He cast one of the parts, Amy Robinson, because she had come out to visit. So it was things were happening there all the time, and none of us really thought anything special was happening. It was just, we were living our lives, and what happened, happened. I knew he was writing a film with Louisa. Louisa Rose was part of the drama department at Sarah Lawrence, and she was a writer. She wasn't an actor, but she wrote plays, and she and Brian are actually the ones who collaborated on writing Sisters. The great story about that script is that we all had Christmas together, and we all got each other presents, and on Christmas morning, we all came downstairs and gathered around the tree, and Brian gave Margie a present, and he gave me a present, and it was the script. And he said, we're shooting in April.
Surprise.
We knew nothing about it. We had no idea. So it was, it couldn't have been better. It couldn't have been better. I loved the script of Sisters. It was so Brian. It had the darkness and the horror and the sort of insanity that was laced through all of his movies, and certainly his work when we were all together at Sarah Lawrence. He was the biggest Hitchcock fan in the world. I remember a bunch of us at Brian's, sort of was like the camp counselor, all going to the opening day of The Birds. This was always part of his lexicon, monsters and darkness. We all went to New York together, and we rehearsed a bit, and Brian cast the movie, and we shot it there.
Where do you live?
Staten Island.
Staten Island? I thought you said you lived in New York.
I'm trying to think why we shot on Staten Island, and
Yes, it is.
I think it had the right feel to it. It wasn't incredibly urban. It had that neighborhood feeling, the way Staten Island does, with the apartment buildings and the streets. It just didn't feel like hustle and bustle of New York City. You know, maybe it was less expensive to shoot there. We weren't a signatory to the union. It was shot under a NABIT contract, and that was a different kind of a contract and a different kind of a union, and it's how you could make low-budget movies. But we were picketed by the Teamsters. We were definitely, it was scary for a while, and then they went away.
Now then, Miss...
Danielle Breton.
I'm Detective Kelly, this is Detective Spinetti, and
How do you do?
this is Miss Collier, your neighbor from across the way.
Hello, how are you? Hello.
That's
Rehearsing with Brian was just sort of reading through the scenes and him being comfortable with the way you were attacking it. And I don't recall anything on Sisters where any of us were much confused about it. It seemed pretty straightforward, and he seemed happy with everything we were doing. I don't recall any big rehearsals. We would just sit around in his apartment and kind of read some scenes out loud, and he'd agree to it.
Honey, I thought we were going upstairs to have a little chat, and if you were embarrassed about the mess, you know, I'm always glad to help you tidy up. Although what you're going to do when you get married, I don't know.
The woman who played my mother in it was my real mother, and those scenes came out of our improvisation. So Grace's mother, who she could never please and was disappointing always because she wasn't getting married and was annoying her mother because she was taking too many amphetamines, was in fact me and my mother.
Oh, I want to write about the apathy in the police force, about where the heroine goes after a bust, about the fat political
have
cat.
to shout right here on the street. What's the matter with you? I've never seen you
I'm
like
on
this.
to something big.
Are you on diet pills again?
Sisters was very tightly plotted, and so it was just a question of the fun of the scenes themselves, but everything was fixed. Hi, Mom. That was entirely improvised. There was a long scene in a coffee shop where I was telling him about David and Lisa.
The woman, the sexual-driven, passionate woman, bursts forth like a ripe fruit.
It was all improvised. It was just me riffing, and really acting at that point for me was, how could I make Brian laugh? I think working with Brian always was just trying to please him and make him have a dark laugh.
Listen, one more word out of you and I'm going to book you. I'll book you on something. I'll find something in the book to book you on. Attempted libel, assault on a police officer. I don't care what it is, but I'll do it.
I saw a murder, and I'll prove it.
Well, Grace was a pretty straightforward character. She had a certain amount of ambition and a certain amount of indifference to what she put other people through, but she was a pretty straightforward girl, especially compared to the two Siamese twins that were incredibly theatrical and sexy and wild. And I would say in general, I was cast in the Grace Collier column more than the sexy Siamese twin column, that most of my parts were like that. Later, I got a chance to do some other stuff, but yeah, that was kind of my wheelhouse.
Why do you have things in pairs, like twins? You have a twin. I have a television commercial to do sometime, and in case I should get the makeup, you know, on a dress, then there's another one for the next take. You see, I'm a model.
She had done a movie called Gaily Gaily. Sisters was quite a fabulous starring role for her. And she had done the show Nichols, a TV series with James Garner. That's when we were living together. When I met her, she was shooting that show. She didn't do any research because all the insanity of those two characters was really written. It was all Brian and Louise's imagination about how one was so shy and one was so seductive. And those characters were, she was absolutely channeling Brian and brilliantly. So on the set, when we were shooting, Brian was kind of grumpy, didn't love being on a set, didn't like being asked all these questions, didn't like the amount of time that everything took. He was impatient. He didn't like sitting around. So he was never in the best of humor. And so he wasn't like somebody who said, let's talk about this and let's rehearse it and let's go deeper. He never said anything like that. He just would say a little more of this, or, you know, it was minimal what he was giving us in terms of direction. He picked people he enjoyed working with and kind of let them go their way and, you know, hoped that they would do their thing. And it was easy to do that because you were getting so much respect from him. You know, I found it very easy. I was never nervous on the set, or I wanted, like I said, I wanted to make him laugh. There was a period that was tough because Margie and Brian were at odds. Basically, I think Margie had a hard time with how grumpy Brian was and how unavailable I think he was as a boyfriend. I think she had this idea that, you know, she was the star of this movie and she was captivating and that he would be her, you know, how one has that fantasy. I'm not saying she was an idiot, but I think that she wanted something more. And during those days, and there were some big crying fests, and I felt very confused and conflicted and in the middle of that. And I always felt I had to look after Margie in those situations when she got very emotional. So those were some tough days. But now I've talked to Brian since then, and he doesn't remember them. So maybe they were bigger in my mind. The split screen stuff in Sisters, if I'm not wrong, I hope I'm not wrong, I don't remember ever seeing split screen before. I think of it as something he invented in that movie. I could be wrong. But, and we had never seen it before, and we were little bratty actresses, and, you know, this is so boring, and this is taking so long, and everything was in such tiny little pieces. And it turned out so great, so cool. Coordinating what was going on downstairs in the lobby with me arriving and the police and Dolph Sweet and all that, and then Margie upstairs with Bill Finley, they had to happen at the exact same time. So there was a lot of coordinating.
What did they call you?
I can't remember that.
Try to remember what they called
Go
you.
away, please.
You can remember.
I can't remember.
You can remember. Look at me.
No.
Look at me.
I was there for the scene with the freaks. That was the first day of shooting.
What did they call you?
It was so crazy with these people, the Lobster Man and Eddie the Giant and the twins, the dancing Siamese twins. It was an amazing group of freaks who came up from Florida, where they lived in the winter when they weren't out with the circus. And it was very bizarre and very surreal, and I think I didn't even know how to react. I couldn't get upset. I couldn't think it was funny. I didn't think it was... I just didn't know what to think. I think I just completely shut down because it was so bizarre, and the choreography was so complicated and demanding. How the camera moved and how we moved and among each other.
Did you know that the germs can come through the wires? I never call and I never answer. That's a good way to get sick. Very, very sick. That's how I got so sick. Someone called me on the telephone!
I think all of Brian's movies have a very serious wink in them. I can always hear him giggling in his dark way. They were very funny, and people were very funny to him, and he was not interested in deep, real, natural scenes between people. He could have been further away from that. It was the theatrics, and it was the humor, and it was the satire that completely ruled his sense of drama.
Don't you remember you realized you could have no home, no husband, no children, no baby?
Yes, I remember that.
Bill Finley was a bit of a muse for Ryan, I think. He was a very odd, creative, strange presence. He himself was just a very sweet and very intelligent guy and very creative. But something happened to him as a performer where he went to very far out places, and it was the kind of places that Brian wanted to go. It was just a perfect match. So I knew Bill real well, and I also knew Dolph Sweet, and I knew Charlie Durning really well.
In that case, I can pretend to be making an informal telephone
No, you just
survey.
do your hand signals. If there's no one up there, I can charm the super into give me a pass key.
No, you've got to make a wax impression.
No one does that.
There was a scene where we were in the truck together, and I'm sure we improvised it. I mean, we knew exactly what we had to do, and we had a great rapport. He was a real good friend, so it was just easy. We just did what we had to do, but it was fun.
Grace has never deliberately told a lie in her life. You have to understand that she's just not quite herself.
I'm fine. There's absolutely nothing wrong with me. All I know is there was no body because there was no murder.
It was a great ending. It was completely bizarre and completely unexpected, and I think we improvised it. I didn't quite follow it. At first, it took me a while to understand exactly what had happened with Charlie Durning and the body and the moving. It was so it took me a while, but I did understand it by the time we did the scene. Like I say, it was a very odd, tense scene, but it was really great because my mother felt so real. And all of the stuff between us just felt like it was there and it wasn't hard to use it, but it was rich. The film, when it came out, my recollection is that it was a little bit disappointing. Not as, it wasn't as big a deal as maybe I had hoped, or it didn't feel like a whole lot of people saw it. It just, you know, people in the business saw it. I'd go for a meeting and they'd say, oh, you were great in Sisters, but that's what people say about your last job. So I didn't feel a big reaction to it, and I wished I had. And maybe I'm wrong, you know. Maybe it was a much bigger deal than my recollection. Maybe it was all about me at the time. I think it's become a classic and maybe more appreciated and more liked now than then. I think Brian was always a little bit ahead of the curve and ahead of his time, and so the whole horror satire genre that he worked in was very much his own and very original. And I think it wasn't until he had a large body of work that could be seen and understood and loved by all the straight people. You know, people in France got it because they had that sort of irreverent and predilection for the imagination of films and the individual filmmaker's voice and vision, but not so here. So I think it's later that people fell in love with the movie. I think Brian likes the ideas. I think he likes coming up with ideas. I remember him saying to me, I think I've retired. And then just when I think I'm done, I get an idea. And that's what spurs him on, whatever this thing is, you know, like this idea to do this film about a horror film about a Hollywood sexual predator. How could you not have that idea, you know, if you're Brian? And how could you not do that once you think of it, you know? That's just the way he is. Working on Sisters was great. It was fun, and it was like every time I worked with Brian, but you know, in a bigger way, in a more exaggerated way, in a better budget way. It was like working with your pals. It just didn't feel like you were doing something and the stakes were high and you had to look perfect and you had to say your lines right and your body had to be beautiful. It was just us. It always felt like that to me. And I don't know that everybody felt that way, but I always felt that way working with Brian, that it was just, we were having fun making his insane point of view our own and bringing it to life. And it felt very natural to me.